Oh, to give a child up was terrible.
Mothers torn from their babies.
And how could she not think about me on my birthdays?
Sold on the black market.
It's very interesting, and who knows the true number of babies that were sold.
At the center, a Butte chiropractor and abortionist, Dr. Gertie Buchanan.
I think she probably did know a lot of people.
Dozens of babies, now grown, searching for family.
We call ourselves Sisters of Circumstance.
And for answers about their past.
I have no history. I'm a black market baby. I have no history.
He said, but I will take my secrets to the grave with me. And he did.
She said, it wasn't exactly legal and you can't talk about it.
Good evening, I'm Ben Weinman, and this is Butte, America, a historic mining town nestled in the Rocky Mountains of Montana. Right now, 34,000 people live in this town, but at its heyday, Butte had over 100,000 people, many of whom lived or died by the work they did in the mines. They would extract copper, which would later power the entire United States electrical grid. It's a town with many stories to tell. You might have heard of the opulent Copper Kings and their race to get to the top. Or more recently, you might have seen the historic jumps of Evel Knievel, an own native son of Butte. But there's another story here in Butte. It's a story hidden deep in the archives, a story that's kept pretty quiet around here. It's a story of a chiropractor who started a side business of selling babies on the black market.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that was a long time ago, wasn't it?
Bonnie, Mabel, and Sue sit around a table paging through memories like sisters.
And this is my little brother. Oh my God, look at my hair. We call ourselves Sisters of Circumstance.
They all grew up in southwestern Montana, all had loving families, and they all came to learn that those loving families were keeping a huge secret.
She said, it wasn't exactly legal and you can't talk about it.
A secret they've traced back to this brick building in uptown Butte. It's where their parents came to get them just hours after they were born. Now, the women were born in the 1950s and 60s, but to tell this story, we have to go back, way back to the 1920s, when a nurse from Chicago started her own chiropractic clinic right here in Butte.
So we've ended the World War. Prohibition has started, so there's no, you think of like kind of the bars and the saloons, but 1919, there's no bars.
We're in a depression. I mean, the whole country is in a major economic depression, and it certainly hits Butte as well as everywhere else.
Historians Aubrey Japp and Diane Sands describe Butte in the 1920s, the time when Dr. Gertie Buchanan opened her own chiropractic clinic in what is now the Metals Bank building right in uptown Butte.
She seems like a character. If you look at pictures of her, she's a very kind of unique looking woman. She's it's very easy to pick her out in a picture, I guess. She had the hair and those little glasses, so she was a character.
At a time when most women were told to stay home and have children, Dr. Gertie Buchanan, or Gertie for short, opened her own business.
Women, they could teach, but if they got married, they could no longer teach. They had to quit their job. Lots of women nurses, but as a doctor, I can only think of a couple.
Gertie worked alongside her husband, who was also a chiropractor, but later opened her own practice.
Yeah, 1920, she had her own office. She did work alongside her husband early on, but yeah, she had her own office, and it was, Mrs. Gertie Buchanan. So she was kind of a trailblazer in that way. She had her own business.
She adopted 5 children, including a set of triplets, which she carted around town in a custom-made bike. She raised her children to be ambassadors for various local products.
She had that Montana Lily who did circus acts, things like that, and was featured in theater. She had triplets that she also ran advertisements about. And then I know she had a son and that Montana Lily as well, and they were like in creamery advertisements, so your kids can be strong as well if, they drink our dairy type of thing.
A trailblazing female physician, a humanitarian, raising a handful of children that were not her own. Her children setting the standard for physical fitness. Gertie was well respected in town, at least at first.
Lots of glowing articles about her. And then about 1927, you kind of see a shift.
In a devoutly Catholic town, the woman who was already rocking the boat by working outside of the home filed for divorce. Jap points out that articles printed in the local paper also suggest Gertie was neglecting her aging parents.
I think the quote in the paper, it was a little ridiculous, but I think her dad said something like, "I've been wearing the same overcoat for 25 years.
And 2 years later, another shocking headline. A headline that let the town peek behind the curtain of Gertie's medical practice. The mother of 5 had been performing abortions, a practice that was not only illegal, but highly forbidden by Catholic doctrine. In 1929, something went extremely wrong.
And then in 1929, you have that first charge of manslaughter.
Manslaughter. Dr. Buchanan accused of killing Violet Morse, a 23-year-old teacher from Anaconda.
Butte, of course, with its reputation for prostitution, etc., of course had abortionists who were practicing there.
Diane Sands has done extensive research on abortions in Montana before the landmark Supreme Court decision that legalized the procedure.
Most abortionists in the state of Montana did have some kind of medical training. Most of the men were physicians of one kind or another who practiced pretty openly, operated on the main streets. These are not particularly back alley, as we tend to refer to them. They are medical and quite common. And there was no birth control. Let's remember that. In terms of women's reproductive health, if you're sexually active, you're at danger of becoming pregnant.
Sands says many parents realized an unwanted pregnancy in the Depression era could make the finances even tighter.
So their choices are pretty limited. Do you have an illegal abortion? Do you place that child for adoption, or do you just have additional children that you can't necessarily care for?
Some women tried to abort their babies on their own.
Well, the most risky is doing it yourself, to yourself. And I know women who have, many of the women that I found death certificates for who died used vacuum cleaners. They used knitting needles. They used Lysol. So they poisoned their entire system, or they punctured their uterus and died horrible, painful deaths of septicemia infection. Definitely don't want to do this yourself.
Others found medical providers like Gertie who were willing to help. But even under medical supervision, the practice was very risky.
And before World War II, there are no antibiotics. There are none. So if you get an infection, you're dead.
And that's just what happened to 3 of Gertie's patients. August 28th, 1929. Jury reprimands Gertrude Buchanan for signing a false death certificate. 3 times she was charged with manslaughter, and all 3 times she was cleared. Folks around Butte say Gertrude actually had a little black book full of secrets that would help her maybe get out of some tight spots. Historians here in Butte have never actually found that book, but they do say she was very well connected.
I think she did have a lot of connections. First husband, a doctor, probably well known. Second husband, a police officer.
It's fairly common with the underworld envelopes of money showing up. And since she was married to a police officer, I don't know.
Gertrude Buchanan, towing the line between being a trailblazing female doctor and an illegal abortionist paying off judges to get out of murder charges.
They're living in the underworld of prostitution, drugs, gambling, etc. And that certainly is the case for the Buchanans.
Is that a pretty profitable underworld? Like, are they making a lot of money in there?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like, so they're living like kings, kind of.
No, I don't know if they're living like kings, but it's a profitable enterprise.
Coming up, in a city full of prostitution and gambling, Gertie found another questionable way to make money.
Because they paid $500 for me.
The story of a group of women who came to be known as Gertie's babies, that's up next. Dr. Gertrude Buchanan, a trailblazing chiropractor that started her own practice here in Butte in the 1920s. She adopted and raised 5 children. She dodged 3 manslaughter charges on botched abortions, and in the 1930s started selling babies on the black market out of this building on Hamilton Street in Butte.
What's going to happen to all of our pictures?
Nearly a century later, a group of women gathered to discuss Gertie's intentions. Was she selfish?
Yeah, she was making some good money.
Was she helping desperate women get out of tight spots?
Did the mothers know that we were adopted?
And how did she keep her work quiet?
How did she get away with this for so long?
Mabel Dean, Bonnie Gower, and Sue Dawkin all grew up in southwestern Montana.
I grew up mostly in Three Forks.
And my mom was Dutch, so I had a huge extended family. I have like 52 first cousins.
I grew up on a farm ranch about 18 miles from Bozeman.
Oh, good childhood. My mother ran a nursing home. We lived in the nursing home.
Wonderful, absolutely wonderful. I was one of 3 children. I was the oldest.
It was wonderful. I don't think that I always thought it was as a child, just because, you know, you're never really happy when you're a little kid. You think you'd rather be living in town or whatever, but, you know, we had horses.
They all knew they were adopted, but they had no idea what they'd find out when they started looking for their birth families.
I went before a judge to petition to have my files opened, and he said, there are no files. Are you sure you're adopted? I said, yes. He said, well, your birth certificate looks as if you were born to your adoptive parents.
And then I asked my mom, I said, what, they told me I wasn't adopted, so what's the deal here? And her response to me was, we promised we'd never tell.
Promised they'd never tell that they bought her on the black market from a chiropractor in Butte. So when you guys go to get your birth certificates, they're like, no, you guys are not, because
Right.
your parents are on this.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
they tell us that we're not adopted.
Only Sue's parents were willing to share some of the details of her adoption.
They just got a call one night that if they wanted a baby, there was one. Got in the car, they picked up the lady that was like the go-between lady, and apparently they'd already had the money. They borrowed the money from my grandpa, so they must have had it tucked away for when the phone call came, because they paid $500 for me. Yeah, which was a lot in 1951. So then they picked her up, went to Butte, and Dad said it was a huge snowstorm, May 2nd.
Her mom and dad drove from Bozeman to Butte, parked the car right here. Dad stayed in the car and kept it running while Mom ran in to pick up the baby. They were given 2 instructions. 1, forge the birth certificate, and 2, throw away the afterbirth.
My mom does remember, she told me that she asked if she could see my birth mother, and she was told, well, you can peek in the door for a second. So she peeked in the door, and she just remembers seeing a young woman lying in bed. That was it.
Her mother took Sue and raised her with love, but she never forgot about her dark beginnings.
They knew it was illegal. They wanted a baby so bad. I guess when you're desperate, you do whatever you can do to get a baby.
The secret about Sue's past festering inside her mother.
She almost had a nervous breakdown, worrying someone was going to take me away.
As Sue's parents grew older, Sue had a growing desire to learn more about where she came from.
And I got their blessing, and I went forward, and I just hired a lawyer because I had to open my adoption files. Well, there were no files.
One by one, these women all heard the same story. There were no adoption records. Their birth certificates, all forged. The only common thread, the doctor who signed the document. So show me the signature.
Here, Pitcairn, yeah.
Someone at a Helena agency started to notice the trend.
But I got a call from them not too long afterward that there was a lady who had the same information on her birth certificate. So they put us in touch.
A core group of 6 of these so-called Gertie's babies forged a friendship, really a sisterhood.
Until I started connecting with the other Gertie's babies, and we all put it together, and it was like, oh, you know, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one, and that was, I mean, we created this really special sisterhood. I mean, I didn't have anybody I was really connected to, but somehow I was connected to these guys because we came from the same place.
The group hit the streets of Butte in the 1990s looking for answers about their past.
It was pretty tight-lipped there in Butte. We talked to one guy in the course of the interview. He said, I know a lot of things. You could be children of political people in Butte. You could be children of prostitutes. He said, but I will take my secrets to the grave with me. And he did. Yeah. People just didn't talk.
If the people wouldn't talk, the buildings did. The women all got to go inside the building where they were born.
Oh my goodness, there were tears and shivers, and just to think that that was the first place, you know, I mean, where we were born, and our mothers were in those rooms. It was really something, very emotional.
By swapping stories and talking to family members, they learned Mabel's mother, a nurse who was kicked out of the Seventh-day Adventist Church for running her own nursing home, actually played a very key role in many of the adoptions.
And she was a God-fearing woman.
Mother, as Mabel called her, owned the Bozeman Hot Springs. It seems many women went there to soak.
And they were natural hot springs, and my mother was into natural healing, and she was a nurse, and she ran a nursing home, and women would come there. Some of them came because they wanted to have babies and couldn't have babies.
And along the way, Mabel's mother did something even Mabel describes as out of character for this God-fearing woman. She started connecting women with a chiropractor in Butte who was selling babies on the black market.
That was Mother taking care of people, and from what I've learned of all these other families, they were all good Christian people. And that's how Mother got to know them. And I know that's why she helped them get babies, because she knew they were good Christians.
Through the years, these Sisters of Circumstance have uncovered 16 adults sold as babies on the black market in Butte.
Wow, if we found 16, I mean, just imagine, because she kept a pile of birth certificates that she would hand out. I don't know how many there are.
It's very interesting, and who knows the true number of babies that were sold, because she would also forge the birth certificate. You know, she'd put the adoptive parents' names on it, so it's not even a case of necessarily it was a recorded adoption. It was that baby was born, and it was born under their parents' names.
I think you could get away with a lot back then. And people didn't talk because they protected each other.
The things they learned about themselves here in Butte led to even more questions about their past. Finally, the answers they've been craving, all thanks to modern technology. That's coming up.
So happy.
Sue, Mabel, and Bonnie, three women who forged a bond over their storied past.
It's made me feel a lot of time that it's maybe the only real family other than what I grew up with that I'll ever have.
Sold on the black market in Butte hours after birth. Adopted for $500 in cash in the 1950s, these women grew up in southwestern Montana not knowing anything about their past. In the 1990s, a common name on their birth certificates helped it all come into focus.
It was amazing because the list kept growing, you know, all these people, they're Gertie's babies too. And then we'd go to the archives in Butte. It was so exciting to see a name, and then we'd track that name down and see if we talked to the doctor who was on the birth certificate. Just all these little clues, you know, that maybe we can find something out.
And with no paper trail, these so-called Gertie's babies had more questions than answers.
Well, there were no files.
Oh, I was angry. I was angry. I was like, why did you not tell me this?
Their unique story attracted some attention back in the 1990s. Look at you guys.
I know we were a lot younger then.
That's a great looking shot. After appearances in Women's World, People magazine, and on Inside Edition, they got a post office box, hoping the national attention would finally encourage their birth families to be in contact.
But I think we really, really, truly thought that, okay, the story's out there, our mothers will see this story, they will respond, and no one responded. And that was really, really disappointing, and it was like, we're never gonna know.
But in the early 2000s, another glimmer of hope.
You just, I think I paid $99, you send it in, they send you a kit, you spit in a little bottle, send it back, and then they send you all your results.
DNA, scientific evidence linking you to family.
That's when we all find out things. Because we, you know, back in the 90s and the 2000s, up until probably 4 years ago, None of us had found out anything. It was just dead ends. And then we all did DNA, and that's when things started happening.
Websites like Ancestry.com and 23andMe, they connect you with people who share your DNA. Now, for the women themselves, it actually took years for them to find those connections. It was another dead end, and it felt like a lifetime of searching.
So then one day I'm checking in, and boom, right there. Her name is your birth mother. Yeah, just like that. And I could not believe it. So I Googled her, looked her up, and called her. I thought, if I don't call her right now, I'm going to lose my nerve. So I called her, and she just laughed, and she's 87, still living. And she said, "Oh, honey, I'd love to help you, but it's just not possible. I just can't be your birth mother. No way." And she pretty much couldn't wait to hang up, so that was the end of the conversation. The thing is, come to find out, she was 5 months pregnant with me when she got engaged to her husband, and they've been married for 67 years. And he is not my birth father because they've done DNA. So I'm a big secret that she can't tell anyone. And I feel bad for her because, my goodness, to keep that secret for 67 years. And if she did admit it, I mean, her whole married life is a lie, because she was pregnant with me when she got engaged and had just had me when she got married.
Sue knows firsthand the trauma a mother goes through when giving up her child. At just 16, Sue found herself pregnant. In her strict Christian family, there was only one option. She gave her child up for adoption, never holding her, never getting to meet her firstborn. Today, Sue realizes she and her birth mother have a lot in common.
Oh, to give a child up was terrible. It's terrible. And what she must have gone through. Sorry. Yeah, I'm sure. And how could she not think about me on my birthdays and things like that?
Twice rejected by her own mother, Sue at least takes comfort in knowing a bit more about her heritage. It turns out she's Irish.
When I found out, I think it was in January or February, and by golly, in March, I had my kids and my son over, and we had Irish stew and soda bread, and yeah.
Mabel's still searching for answers about her birth family. At her age, she's pretty confident she'll never meet her parents, but she holds out hope that DNA may soon link her to her brother or sister.
I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm not banking on finding anything. I'm trying to keep an open mind, and like I said, a lot of it's because of what happened with Bonnie.
And this is my brother Ken in Pennsylvania.
For years, Bonnie also logged in and waited, hoping to find any connection she could. In the last year, as the popularity of DNA testing grew, Bonnie was able to connect with both sides of her biological family.
It is a feeling of, it just felt like this took this weight off my shoulders, and like I was happy. I am so, so blessed that I got to not only meet both sides of my family, but to have them love me and want me in their family. And then when I think about Mabel and Sue, who've not been able to experience that, it makes me really sad, because I think that I'm so lucky and so blessed. Yeah, it makes me cry.
Hundreds of years of history located in this town, but still not a lot actually known about Dr. Gertrude Buchanan. Was she providing a much-needed service, or was she doing something much more sinister? The women you heard from tonight say they lived happy and healthy lives, and they owe it all to Dr. Buchanan. For more on their stories and more on Gertie, you can visit our website. Thanks for joining us, everyone. From Butte, America, I'm Ben Weinman. Have a good night.